Welcome to the Wing Life Podcast, where we talk about wing foiling and the lifestyles of those who enjoy this great sport. All right, guys, thanks for coming back.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Excited to talk about foiling again.
Oh, don't we just love foiling?
Yeah, this is going to be a fun one. Your first foiling flights. This is like when you go from struggle to like the magic, and then a whole new, I guess, set of challenges arise.
I mean, the funny thing, again, like, you know, kind of like we've talked about that before, but it's like when you look at it, it looks pretty simple. I mean, if you look at somebody foiling, let's say wing foiling, they're literally not moving and it works. And they're just like cruising, flying above the water without moving. So you think, you know, I can't do that. I can stand on that thing and not move and it's going to work. And it doesn't. So I think it would be interesting actually to, well, it will at some point, but not right away. So it would be interesting to kind of like share our own experience of like our first flight and kind of like expectations and how did it actually go. And I think maybe we can start with Damien. You were probably the first one to be on a foil out of the three of us, and maybe even in the world.
I would say it was, brilliant. It was easy. You just get up and you just go. And, like there's nothing to it.
Show's over, boys.
I would say, look, anybody listening in, we're doing this to inspire, to just share that passion that we all love about foiling that you're getting into. So, DM us. Send us your content. We can break it down. We can run through tons of stuff in this. But anyhow, in this episode, we're going over your first flights foiling, and I'll kick it off here. But I would say you look at a foil, exactly what Gwen says. You see everybody out there, whether it's kite foiling, whether it's wing foiling, whatever type of foiling it is, e-foil. You look at it and you're like, that's awesome. That doesn't look that hard. And I would say that it's not necessarily that it's hard when you actually like sort of learn it. It's you just don't move and it's like you're going to be okay. But when you're first learning it, like it's more like you try to muscle things. That's not going to work. You do so many things that you think could make it work. And if anything, you almost need to like relax and like slow it down. And like women and children are really good because they're really, I would say, maybe less aggressive or less muscly on things. And I feel like, and everybody is different for sure. There's very talented people out there, but I would say breaking down my first go, I remember it 100%. And I did a demo in Tampa, Florida, and I had just been dropped off a foil from Nick Leeson at Lift Foils. And this is day one of like first foils in kind of the US getting going, and foiling's been around before that, but like never was a thing. And so I did this big kite surfing demo, and then everybody left, and I was like, wow, the winds are lighter. Like this is what the foils are for. And I struggled like no other. I mean, I would just get going, and it's your first flights. I would get going. I was really good with a kite. So I'd get the power and I'd get the foil and all of a sudden it would like release and it was like a rocket ship, and I didn't know what to do. I'd have too much power, fly out of the water, come too high, didn't know how high I was, porpoise, crash, start all over again, and go through this process of like, how do I calm this like bumblebee down? It was like, I didn't know what to do because this thing was, the second it would move, get on foil. It was like, felt like I was like hitting like grease, like, cool. It was like, what's going on? And so it was a new process of learning when you get up on foil is to have this. Well, here's what I would say for everybody that's listening. It was awesome because there's this feeling that you can't describe with foiling that is you're completely flying. There's endless energy and power and efficiency and glide. And it's like everything you've ever dreamed of sort of watching movies when you're little about flight or freedom of like hovering, or there's this really crazy sensation that you get. Now your first times, it's a whole different sensation. It's like bending your ankles and doing all these things that I was like, because at the time I learned with a kite surfboard with foot straps and probably not recommended. Was getting bent like left and right, backwards, scorpions, you name it. But it was so awesome. And I know that sounds not very awesome, but it's you started to get the glimpse of what it does and how amazing it can be. And then I think the biggest thing I took away from that day, and I'm just speaking that first part, my first experience of it, was like, I took away, if I can just slow all my movements down, like literally pull everything away, like my legs moving really hard and big twitchy movements. And then the big one was taking the kite and using less power, because I realized that the foil had so much efficiency that it didn't matter if I weighed 200-300 pounds or 50 pounds, like it will get me up and get me going. And it'll be a almost similar efficiency because I had so much lift and efficiency. And so that was a really hard thing to learn, was to eliminate power. Now, if I look to like my first experience wing foiling, I would say we were using wings that maybe weren't as good as they are now. So we needed a lot of wind, but we were using bigger boards and so on and so forth. But I would just say that you're just going to fall in love with it. That first flight is so spectacular, and you may struggle for weeks until you get it. At least I did. I think people nowadays learn a lot quicker, but in a nutshell, that's kind of my first experience. Gwen.
I mean, for me, like I had seen foiling on, social media and everything for a long time before I finally got a foil and was able to try it. And so I kind of I think like most people underestimated, how hard it would be. So in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm getting this foil. I've seen some guys running and jumping on it off a dock, so I'm gonna do that. That I literally had never been on the foil before, and so that after, I don't know, maybe 50 attempts and literally zero success, zero glide, zero time on foil, I realized, okay, this thing is not easy, and I gotta find a way to learn properly. I'm realizing it's gonna, you have to take it by step. All right, let's take this seriously and go step one. So then I was able to get a friend to tow me behind a boat, and that was a game changer. So to me, your first time foiling, if you can do it behind a boat or with an e-foil. I didn't have access to any foil at that time, so to me it was behind the boat. But those two options are gonna be your best shot, and it is so sensitive. So you get on it when you first start lifting off, like you describe. It's this incredible feeling, but everything happens also very fast. You don't know how to handle it, so you kind of have to slow things down. And that's why, again, through time, if you started very early, like you, Damien, you probably had a smaller foil, which makes things harder because everything happens faster, because you need to have more speed. And if you have more speed, you can go up and down quicker, and you can bridge the water sooner, and crashes happen easier, and you don't have as much time to get used to it. So I was pretty lucky. I had a big spoon foil. It was the lowest aspect foil in the world. It was literally looked like a big spoon, super thick, super slow, a massive stabilizer. Looking back, it was actually the perfect foil to learn, and I was lucky because I didn't know anything about foils, and I got that one, and it turned out it was really good. I got it used. And so, I mean, the one tip that I got from my friend that was towing me, that on day one made all the difference in the world for me, was he said, just you. He said, just use your hip to go forward and back, to go up and down. just your hip. Don't, think about front foot, back foot, because that's too much. At the beginning, you exaggerate every movement. And so he like literally showed me like, with your hip, you move it forward and back. And then from literally that moment, I was able to manage how high I was on the foil. So that was like, to me, that was the day one breakthrough. And but again, it was behind a boat, and I think it just becomes, it's possible to learn, with a wing in your hand. It's just going to be, a bit harder because now there is more moving parts. Now there is like, you are the one in charge of the power. You are playing with the wind, which is not as consistent as just like the pull from the boat. So that was, my first experience. And then after that, I took it to kite foiling. And then there was like an adjustment time again, because now I was managing the power. And so that kind of like, took me some time, but that was my first experience foiling. And when you finally get to fly above the water and the noise, it's quiet. And even if you have a slow foil, you feel like you are going so fast. It's the most incredible feeling in the world.
Mine was a bit different. I was a windsurfer, right? So I was on a big, easy windsurf setup. And to be honest, going straight and getting up, it was the most awkward, weird feeling I've ever experienced. I didn't know what to do, but eventually I just would move my mast forward or my sail forward and backwards, and that's what would help my board go up and down. And I had a big, super easy foil, so I got flying within 20 minutes. Forget about turning though, forget about everything else, but like going up and down windsurf wise, but it was just, I didn't know how to make what go what, and I couldn't judge my depth. So it took me forever to figure out, am I too high? And the wipeouts were some of the craziest wipeouts
I've ever had. Like wind foiling looks the most sketchy foiling thing because your wing is attached and you can get, I don't know, it just like, it almost seems, it looks the hardest to me. I haven't done it, the wind foiling, but It looks to be the hardest form of like foiling.
Jibes are terrifying, which is like, we're going to go into the next episode, but falling, you have to make sure to hold on to your boom because there's too many moving pieces. And if you happen to buckle and get your feet caught, I had that happen once or twice. And so it was scary. I saw some potential, but I was nowhere near, like graceful. Yeah. It took like, I don't know, like years, but so I guess frequently asked questions about your first flight. I don't know, once you get hooked though, it's pretty fun, but still hips, that's a great idea. Head, even like hips, that's all you did, right? Just move the hips slightly a little bit.
Well, and that's just like
everything's tense too.
To go back to what you said, Damien, about like women like have like, maybe like a better first experience, let's say. I feel because they are very like
smart, much better than us. Everything better.
And they kind of like very methodical, like they take it step by step, and they don't skip steps. They just like, go easy. And that's what the foil needs, where, we try to muscle it and we try to like, until you get, you crash and you maybe like, you kind of like get scared and you're like, okay, I gotta take it easy. But at first you just want to be like, let's go, and it's like, no, let's, first step, slowly, and then it's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say one important point that I think you nailed great, and we can lead into those first flights is one is no matter what you're using, I think Gwen did it really well, is if you can eliminate, call it the wing or the windsurfer or the kite, and just have towing, we'll just call it behind a boat or behind a jet ski. And I'd even say a boat's tricky because a boat may take a lot more, it'll pull you really quick. It depends on your pilot. We'll call it your driver. So an e-foil is really, really good. And I say that truthfully because you're 100% in control of your power, which makes you learn how to, one, manage it, two, be able to balance on that power ratio of whatever you put in. So you're really in control of it. And I'd say for anybody out there listening in, that's a very good way to learn the basics of foiling. But now, as we drive into those first flights, and some key things to really think about when you're on a wing is, you're now pretty proficient with, tacking probably up, back and forth. You're not really going downwind. You're feeling pretty comfortable with your wing, and you're maybe starting to get that little bit of light feeling on the nose, and it wants to kind of like, feels like the board's already trying to lift, but it's still tapping along. And all that is good, because the reality is, whether you're 2 inches off the water or 3 feet, if you can stay 2 inches off the water, it's going to make your life a lot easier when you're learning. But again, that's like what Gwen and Luc are saying is, there's that hip shift or that weight shift where you're trying to find the balance, and you don't know where that is in your first, kind of flight. But some really important things to think about when you first start flying is board direction. And the reason I say that is when you get up on foil, I guess the easiest way to describe it in a big picture would be sticking your hand out the window when you're driving with a car, and you stick your hand out and you can maneuver just the angle of your hand, and it's going to go up or down really easily. And in theory, in the water, it's the same thing with your mast, because there's so much of a we'll call it a rudder, that if all of a sudden that nose lifts up really good and I'm flying, I'm like, whoa, I can literally just steer with my feet. No matter what the power is doing, I can just steer the board downwind, and I'm going to lose the power because I'm going to go downwind. I.e., I can do the same thing and steer the board into the wind and create more power. And it's a great thing to think about when you do your first rides. And the reason I say that is a lot of people just think about edging. A lot of people think about the wing and the power. And I would say, think about getting it to fly, and then don't be afraid to use your board. And your wing, you can grab power, lose power by releasing or gaining. But I would say the one thing I think I see a lot, and it's always normal, is you're bent over. You're like completely bent over, like the wing's like way out in front of you. You're not standing vertical. And I would just say, like, stand vertical, chest towards your wing, and you're going to have more leverage. But be aware of your board direction, and you're going to notice it's going to help you a lot in those first touch and goes, because you don't need to go 500 yards. You can just do little touch and goes, put the board back down, start again. And I think that's like the basic best way, I would say, to get kind of those feelings of the flight.
Because I think one point that threw me completely off guard is kiting and windsurfing. We're so used to leaning out and edging. And this sport, it was like you were on a sheet of ice, and you had to stand perfectly still and perfectly straight and perfectly over your center of gravity. Like, everything had to be in line, and all you needed to do was shift your weight. What you felt is you just moved your head or your hips a couple inches back, and then boom, it was up. And then you couldn't lean off to the side because this thing would just kick you off like a Bronco. So at the start, it's nothing about muscle. It's all about just center focus, staying on top of things. And it's going to take a while. And my brain was just like fried, just so exhausted. So don't worry about, those are all normal steps to this thing. And that's why I think they say it looks easy, but it looks easy after a lot of hours. But some people learn really fast. You never know.
So to me, in learning how to foil, it's very different if you do it on an e-foil and if you do it with a boat, in the way that, like, to me, the e-foil is going to be the best way to learn your, like, shifting your weight forward and back, because you are like literally standing straight on top of the board, and you have, with this way, you have the best feeling of weight forward, shifting back to start taking off, bring it back forward to come down. You are like isolating almost that one axis of like forward and back, because you stand straight on top of the board. With foiling behind the boat, with a wing, with a kite, you have another component, and it's hard to dissociate is the fact that like now you have power pulling you kind of like sideways. So you kind of have to counter that. And otherwise you end up in the position you just said, Damien, where like you are bent over and it's taking you. So you want to lean slightly against it. You always have to keep doing that. Otherwise, you kind of like that's almost giving you some sort of stability, because now you have like two opposing forces. It's stable. But in this position, what we are used to through kiting and through windsurfing is when we lean back, we are also on the back foot. We are like leaning against the power and leaning back. And now that is where you have to dissociate leaning back against your power, your wing, the boat, the kite, and forward and back. So now you still have to lean against your power, but now you have to be over your front foot, not over your back foot. And we see that all the time through learning how to wing. If you are leaning against your wing, you are cruising along, but you are on your back foot, it's going to work. You're going to track upwind. But when it's time to get up on foil, it's like putting on the brakes. Why? Because you are telling the foil to get up at a steep angle, and unless you have tons of power, it's just not going to go. You would need a fighter jet to just take off like straight up. You don't have a fighter jet. You have like a tiny plane with a small engine. And so you have to make that hill very, very slow. So you have to apply the principle that if you get the chance to e-foil, you're going to feel that at the beginning when you start going, it's forcing you to put your weight forward. So now you're going to have to apply that weight forward over your front foot, moving your hip over the front and leaning back against the power. And now you can pick up speed. And the ideal position to me, when I see my students, is like you are pretty much foiling, but your board is still touching the water, because now you are leaning against the power. You have speed. You are generating speed, but you are not letting the foil go up. It could go up, but you are keeping it down. You are keeping your board on the water. That's a great position, because from there, all you need is just shift your hip back, and it's gonna start lifting, and you just move it back forward, and you're gonna come down. That's the best position to be in, because now you are in control. If before you hit the speed where you have enough speed to get up on foil, you are already on your back foot, it's gonna get up without you really being ready for it to get up. And now you have to react. You are not acting, you are reacting to the foil lifting. So it's very important, and that's why I feel like women have more success, because when you tell them keep your weight forward, they do, because they listen to you. And men are like, I want to get up. Let me lean on that back foot. And then it gets up, and then either it's like backflip right away, or you just breach and come down. So to me, it's better to be prepared, take it step by step. And when you get up, you got up because you shifted your weight back, rather than be in a position where you got up, you were not ready. Now you have to all of a sudden put it down.
Mm-hmm. Good points, Gwen. What about foot positioning? Because I had some of my clients where they were going more of a goofy kind of snowboard style versus more facing forward, like almost more surfing, like front foot is almost pretty straightforward. So when any pull, either from a boat or from a wing or from a windsurf, it would help the board go forward versus buckling on the side, because their butts would, if they were more goofy footed, like you're snowboarding, as soon as they would get pulled, it would automatically kind of bend them in half. Have you seen any of those kind of things as well?
Yeah, I was just going to say that biggest thing, now I'm stepping way back in the very beginning of learning this. And I would say it stands out now still to this day. And that was when in the very beginning, when somebody asked me, what's the key to foiling, I always felt like if this is my wing and this is my mast, my body should always be in line with wherever that mast is. It should, if this is my board right here and I'm standing on it, what happens is everybody gets started and they start to break here. And then whatever this does is going to just, you're just going to crumble. So it's really important to always be in line with your mast, in my opinion. And it doesn't mean that you have to be bent over like crazy angles. You can be a tiny bit at an angle, but that means that the pressure of my body is pushing directly into my foil and I'm not breaking at the waist. And the wing and the boat and the kite all add to what Gwen said, that second item of I have to control versus an e-foil where there's one item and that's the power and standing on the board versus another item that's now opposing that I have to hang on to and it can break me. So it's important to always have your foil, your mast, I would say your mast in line with your body. So if everything can be vertical like that, then all you're really doing is you're still breaking it down to the exact same thing in the very beginning, which we talked about, is the forward and back, because really you're standing directly over the mast. You can't break over the front or back, scorpion, or fall over the front, crumble. You now just have to create the up and down using your shifting your hips forward or back. And I think that's a huge key, because when you're first learning, you're fighting the wing, you're bent over. And now when you're bent, when the foil has a little bit of energy, it's going to try to break you even more when you're completely bent over. So I would say, I think foot position, I think can be moved to that's a tricky foot position. I think in the beginning is pretty tricky because everybody's foils could be maybe too far back, too far forward. Their wing can pull them in different positions. But I would say in general, when you get to a certain point, and you'll know that point when you're, like Gwen said, when you're riding along and you're efficient enough to kind of be skipping, you can be foiling with the board still kind of on the water. And I think people think I have to be up. And I totally agree with Gwen that your foil, if you get movement going, that foil's still, it's working, it's starting, it's already trying to lift you. It's already trying to get it more light to where the board will just skip on the water. That's the best time to understand and really learn it versus trying to go super high, because which again is exactly what Gwen's saying. Women will listen and they'll stay right there, and men are like, "Phew, I'm up, look at me," and then they crash. Right? That's kind of how it goes. Sorry, we're probably stereotyping men, but it's for sure what I did.
So to me, like with like foot position, what's interesting is like, I don't think there is like one, magic, or like a calculation you could do, and it's like my feet should be there. Otherwise, it's almost like you could have foot straps, and that would be the best way because it would keep your feet right there. But in my opinion, it's not recommended to learn with foot straps. But it's just like, e-foiling, like you like literally, don't have really to tell people where to put their feet. They're going to naturally put them where they need to be. But the one thing that I would say helps is not to necessarily be in line, like on the center line of the board, but be slightly offset. So like if we are talking about like winging or kiting or something that has some power to explain it, your front foot would be slightly upwind and your back foot would be slightly on the downwind rail. That offset position where your feet are not on the center line is giving you a tiny bit more stability side to side. So not only you have kind of like, leverage forward and back, but you also have now more leverage side to side. And that, to me, I've seen more success with having people slightly offset than having people totally on the center line of the board. Now, something that is important, and again, it's the difference, a big difference between e-foiling and anything where you are being towed, is you always want to keep an edge when you are being towed. And that's a result of countering that force. Otherwise, like you explained, Damien, you are breaking that line between you and the foil, and now you are gonna tackle and you're gonna fall on your foil or so if there is something pulling you, you're always going to have an edge that's kind of like countering that. It's, you can think about it if you've done some snowboarding, like snowboarding. You always keep your edge when you go down, when you snowboard. Imagine if, the edge is kind of like the edge that's facing uphill. If you edge with your edge facing downhill, you are like going snowball, and it doesn't work. So you always have that edge against the power. So the mountain would be like, okay, it's pulling you downhill. You are edging against it. You have a wing. You are edging against it. As soon as you start breaking that edge and come flat, if you have power, now it's taking you. Now you are not in control anymore. So that's very important to always, with your feet position, it can help to be offset, to keep that rail, upwind rail, slightly digging, just like snowboarding, you just like you would do snowboarding. For sure, I would say helmet, impact vest. I mean, I've like cracked ribs learning, like you're gonna get beat up, and that's part of the process. So like, protect yourself. If you have like, I would say try not to learn with a foil that's sharp on the edge, that it's not necessary. It doesn't really like increase performance, and it's just more dangerous. The foil I started with, it was like literally you couldn't like cut yourself on the back on the edge, because it was coming down like that, and it was like literally a wall on the side. But they don't make that anymore. I guess it's not good enough, but
because nobody learned how to foil. No, I would say, look, the best advice when you're at this stage of getting up your first flights is make sure you put the time in, tacking back and forth, or putting your time in taking an e-foil lesson, or because the reality is you don't have to be flying on foil. You can be having that board hovering along, like Gwen said, like literally if this is the ocean or water flat, that you can just be a tiny bit at tilt with the mast right here. And that tiny bit of tilt can just be enough lift where that board's skipping along, where it can take you upwind and upwind and upwind and upwind. And then you can, again, just you can have that board on the water, and at any given time, like Gwen said, you can just little shift back with your hips, and all of a sudden it's going to lift and fly. But if you can learn and know that front foot or my weight forward is going to just put the nose back down, you get that control by kind of tapping the water, or very minimal lifts, like very, the board almost just always tapping. You can learn foiling, I think, so safe and so fast. But you will go through those experiences no matter what, where how much shifting of the hip back is too much. And then obviously how quick do I go forward with it is too much. That's all part of that first flight, because you don't know until it starts to happen. But again, if we're here to try to help you, I would say just slow everything down and try to just very minimal movements, do a lot, like a lot. Like I remember always talking to people like, if I just step way back like 3 inches, it's like a double backflip. It's like very minimal movements. If any, do a lot. And I think that's
it's like a unicycle on the water. So same concept. Yep. You have to be. It's more about being like very precise, or slack line or something like that, than like muscling your way through a unicycle or on a slack line is not helping. Nothing is saving you. You just have to be very precise, and that takes time to feel that, have that finesse, and that's why taking it slow, so that you spend enough time through all of the steps that we described, so that that feels familiar, and then you are ready to add the next step, and it's not too overwhelming. If you go from nothing to all of the aspects, it's going to be very hard to handle.
Mm-hmm. All right, fellas.
In both directions.
Yes.
Very important.
Good
We've
point.
tapped on this before, but
Yep.
always do both directions, because you get really like keen on one side and you're like, I'm getting it. And then you're like in the ocean, you can't even come back. You got to swim back. So it's like super important to train both ways. And there's going to be energy of the ocean maybe hindering one direction and gaining on another direction. So it's really important that whatever you do one way, 100% do it the other way, even if it's in short bursts, because you need to train all those same directions.
It's actually a common saying that I hear, because and we are part of, maybe sometimes showing the bad example is, when if we ride with foot strap, or if we just don't switch feet, we ride toe side. Now people are watching us and they're like, oh, you don't need to learn the other way. You just ride toe side. And I've heard it so many times that like, can I start? Can I put myself toe side pretty much? And I'm like, no, nobody goes
You
up.
did in the beginning.
Well, yeah, on Sinkerboard, I would do it for sure.
And he struggled, people, big time. He would struggle big time. So no.
But, now that I'm here to tell you the right way, not tell you what not to do.
Your finger.
So yes, it is important to learn both ways.
Not to throw you under the bus.
You heard it, folks. You heard it. All right, guys. Our next one is going to be, I can go straight, now what? So we're going to lead into that one. And for folks at home who are taking all this in, send us your clips, send us your videos, drop us some comments. Let us know how your first foil flights went, and then what were your tips and tricks that you found to help you. But thanks a lot for joining us on this one, and we will chat with you guys soon.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.